I'm Arda, she's Emily, and we will be here for the next 7.5 hours talking Call of Duty League.
Would we be able to talk about COD for 7.5 hours? Actually, we probably could.
I think if we like put every single topic back to back to back,
Yeah.
we could make a. You know what? I bet you.
I mean, I have a full Modern Warfare rant that's at least an hour long, I feel.
Yeah. See,
No one wants
I
to
want that
hear
in a
it.
video. No. I want that in a video. I want that in VOD at some point. I
Like
want to do like.
breakdown with
Do you know what we should
spreadsheets.
do? You know what would be fun actually? In all seriousness, Emily, at the end of the season, I would love to do like an hour VOD where we just like talk about tie a bow on everything.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's
that'd
going to
be
be
great.
me pooping on Modern Warfare for forever, but
Which is
let's
totally
go.
fine. I
Let's
think
go.
hopefully we're back. I see us back on Twitch. Apologies for the technical issues, but thank you for sticking with us. So Arda and Emily here, and we are going to break down all things Toronto home series completely in a fair and impartial fashion. Ignore the threads. Just ignore, okay? Just ignore. But we got a lot to get to. We're gonna talk about everything that happened in the last home series. But we do have a little bit of breaking news here. Aches and the LA Gorillas end their relationship officially. Here is the tweet that was sent out by the Gorillas. And since then, Aches has also tweeted. So you can see on your screen the statement from the LA Gorillas. And it's simply the caption, "Thank you, Aches." And Aches tweeted the following: "Clearly disappointed with how this year worked out and have a lot of mixed feelings, but that's all I really need to say on the matter. Still going to move forward to what's next with my head held high. I appreciate all the love and support." So this seems like such an anticlimactic ending for Aches. He hadn't played in a long time.
Did you think he was just going to like pop off on Twitter and like go on a rant or something?
I mean, I bet a lot of people sort of assume like he hadn't been in the forefront for a very long time. We haven't seen him in a long time in professional play. If you don't follow him on Twitter, it would have been out of sight, out of mind for him and the Gorillas anyway. So I don't know. It just seems like a very like a series finale that just leaves you empty. You know?
I mean, I think we haven't seen him at all online, right? He did not play in their own like home series, and that's when they brought in the team that they have now. I think it was pretty clear that he was not going to start for them, and they were going to go with the younger talent that they did sign. So, I mean, there's also, I don't know for a fact how much it is, but I know you and I have mentioned this off camera. It's highly likely that his contract is probably much larger than the rest of the team. So that might also have something. Yeah, that might also have something to do with it. But like, I do see this as more of a mutual parting of ways than like anything else. And it was pretty clear the team wasn't going to move ahead with Aches on the roster. So
what happens to him now? I mean, obviously he can't join a roster for the remainder of the season, but does he care to try next season? Do you think he still has the passion? Does he try a different role? Does he become a coach, GM? Does he become a streamer? What do you think is next for him?
I mean, I think he probably tried. Like from the sound of his tweet, it kind of sounds like he's. And I feel like this season in particular is going to be really interesting when we look back at how a lot of veteran pros handled it, right? Because this has been one, like, I feel like this season, due to factors within the league's control and with, some of which we'll talk about, and beyond the league's control, has been incredibly frustrating for a lot of people involved. And it's been like, we saw like the big name we keep bringing up is like, it's kind of crazy that Karma is not playing COD anymore, right? Like it just is. And this season has been a trial for a lot of people. And I think it seems to me, and again, I'm making a lot of assumptions just based on one tweet. It seems to me that Aches is just kind of like scratching the year off and being like, okay, GG, go next. Like, I'll try to get a team next year. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a completely different game. And hopefully, we can just consider this year a wash. I don't know if that's me presuming too much, but from his Twitter reaction, like that's kind of how it seems like he's treating it.
I feel like he is in a position where he's garnered enough clout and respect in the Call of Duty competitive community that at least one team would give him a chance
Hmm.
in any circumstance next season. I can't imagine this is the end of Akes' professional career in Call of Duty.
Nah, I don't think it will be.
Yeah.
I do think it is interesting though that we have seen a lot more teams gravitate towards bringing in younger talent from challengers. That has been like, I don't want to say like untested, because it's super unfair actually to say that like Pharaoh, for example, is untested, but I think you do see a lot of teams gravitating towards players that may not have been given a chance otherwise, or younger players, which has been really interesting to see in a franchise system. But I do still think that there will be more than a few teams that would be willing to take a chance on Akes and bring him onto your roster for 2021.
There were definitely more than a few teams upset with the events that transpired this past weekend.
Excellent segue. Yeah, I love it.
I try. If there's one thing I work on is the segues. So, Emily, Slack drops out of a match against London. The Surge lose the match, one player down. Here is a tweet from Slack: winning the map 57-30-ish and lag out. So the internet was the concern for Slack. It wasn't a user issue. It was an internet issue. And we take the map loss, one of the biggest matches of the entire year, for us to make top 8. Love this league. Now, to be fair, Slack has definitely deleted, and Octane as well, have deleted a lot of tweets disparaging the league and saying it's a chalked league and competitive integrity, etc. Now, here's the thing. The challenge here is what should be done and what is happening in Call of Duty League specifically when issues like this arise. This is not the first time we're talking about this, Emily. This will not be the last time. What is happening, though?
Is. Jesus.
Hopefully it is, but we're still talking about these issues. This is the facts are this is an issue that is not Slack's fault. The internet crapped out. So in this situation, in any other major esport, including Valorant, which is just getting off the ground, the game will pause. The scenario will restart where the round would continue in Valorant. And then after that, they would pause and wait until the player gets the internet back up and running, and then they would continue. In Call of Duty League, that is deemed to be a team/player error or issue, and therefore it is their fault. The onus is on the player and the team.
So here's the thing. First of all, that is BS, and the rule shouldn't be that way. But even if the rule was that way, they haven't always ruled it as such, because similar situations have happened several times now since transitioning online. And there are a few times when a game was remade. I believe it was London. I want to say it was London versus FaZe, but that might have been one that wasn't remade. Anyway, there was one time where it was London has had a lot of unlucky issues like this, and in this specific case, they were on the other side of it, with scraps dropping out. One game was remade. There was one time where he had stepped away and they tried to team kill, and they wouldn't let them restart. I think the main issue, so first of all, I don't think that internet issues are on the team. I think the league, the ruling should always be that the game is paused and you restart it. I don't see why that is so hard. Maybe it is something to do with the game itself and the fact that it's so unfriendly to competition. I don't know. I don't know if it's a game thing where it's just really difficult to just end. But honestly, this is ridiculous. I was really mad, but it's just one of those things. Why does this keep happening? And why is there not a blanket statement? Why is there not a blanket ruling across the entire league? And why are these things not consistent? And additionally, I think the most frustrating thing is that I believe in every single situation. So I know I believe Dallas came out and said this when they were in London's position. London came out and said this because it's happened to them before. I believe FaZe also came out and said it when they were in the position of like, would we remake this game for you? And the other team always says yes. So it's not like the teams aren't like over like unilaterally, I believe teams have said, yes, we will remake this game. Like we want this to be fair. We don't want to win. Like I think it was
it was FaZe, right? Where that happened with the water bottle, that the incident where he went back and came back and they said, no, this is not how we want to win.
Yeah, so for this, like Dylan tweeted like GG's. I think he tweeted like GG's, we won 2-1 or something. Because no team does want to win like this.
No,
and it's just it makes me so mad. I do appreciate the COD competitive subreddit for saying that they are going to pool money together and start a GoFundMe for Octane's fines. I thought that was great.
Way to rally behind the player.
I know, right? I mean, they should though. This is like I don't want champs to be this, you know? Like I don't want something like this to happen at champs. I want like the setup is there despite the fact that it's online to have, and despite the fact it's online, despite the fact that it's on this game, there is a setup where we have a great, fun, competitive tournament. And I want everything to be done to make that happen.
Absolutely. And the fact that it is something as simple as something every single person who has internet has experienced at one point or another, having faulty internet, your Wi-Fi craps out, the internet service provider shuts down for a half hour, something happens. Look at Hiko in Valorant right now is dealing with this in pro tournaments, having to drive half hour out of his house to try and find serviceable internet, or using the hotspot on his cell phone to try and compete in games, okay? Internet is a common problem. But the fact that the way that it is being handled, and I will give credit to the league for trying to improve in certain areas, but this has to change. If a pause function cannot be included in this version of the game, and let's say it is going to be included in the Treyarch, whatever it's going to be called, Black Ops Cold War, or whatever is coming next, okay? Whatever's coming next.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. But this has to be considered. Even if it took 15 minutes to restart a game and create the scenario that is worthy of maintaining the integrity of competition, especially as we go into the playoffs, that is the right thing to do. Nobody's going to complain. Maybe you'll get a couple of Pepe hands in chat. But other than that, you're going to get people are going to understand.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think like the thing with COD, and the reason why I was kind of surprised it got franchising at all, is that you have like a really dedicated fan base. Like they're small when you compare it to other esports, but it's like a really like fervent, dedicated fan base that just really loves competitive COD. And if you ask those people, would they rather see a fair match and have to wait 15 minutes for like, I don't know, whatever the game to run out or something, you know, like we just all shoot each other, and you know the hard point gets to like 250 to 3 or something to get it cycled through, so we go to the next. Like that has to happen. I feel like the community will understand that, right? And
of course they will. Of course they will.
Yeah, like everyone would rather have a competitive series. Like it's so frustrating that this is still a thing. Like after the first time it happened, this is still a thing. And the fact that if the official ruling is actually like this is a team issue, that is like shocking, honestly. Like shockingly rude and awful. And that is that's just a terrible ruling. Because there's nothing like that is actually beyond teams' control.
So, upon doing some digging, according to some sources, that is in fact the exact stance from the league, as we know that it was an internet error. 100% that is their stance. That it is a internet issue, falls upon the player and the team. There is an appeal process, however, it won't really do much since the standings cannot be changed. So really, the sentiment among the Seattle team, who essentially, I mean, they're destined now at this point. The best they can be is ninth, and they're in 11th right now.
Mm-hmm. Which
They
does,
are
yeah, it's
right.
they're in the play-in bracket basically.
Yeah, they're in they're basically now in round one
Mm-hmm.
losers bracket. That's where
Mm-hmm.
they are because every team makes the playoffs. But the sentiment among the Seattle team is, all right, well, guess better wait for next year and hope things get better. I mean, that's
I mean, that has to be
unfortunately
your attitude at this
right,
point.
right, and that's unfortunate. Okay, let me ask you this before we get off this topic. What do you think the conversations are like within the CDL right now? Like they have to like I want to I don't want I am not the person to say that all is bad with this league. I do think that there are some really smart and good meaning people working there. I have a lot of respect for people, including Joanna Ferris. I think that she's a great commissioner. What do you think the conversations are like right now? When you see this and you're like, well, we can't have this happen in champs because that would be a black eye bigger than what we already have given what's happened this year.
I don't even know because honestly, like this, and not that they've been super strict about this to begin with, because rulings have kind of been all over the place from referee, but this sets a kind of dangerous precedent, right? If you're going to call this, if you're going to rule on the side of this, and like I get the other side of it, like the why, which is what's to stop a player from DCing when they're losing, right? And just being BM to like reset the map. I think that's the idea behind it. However, the league, like behind the scenes, has to be talking to each other about how are they going to make rulings like fair across the board, and make sure that all, like, we've talked about issues with referees before, and either them like not paying attention or just not being at all like present during matches. And you need to make sure that referees are clued into the ruling. I mean, in my opinion, if that's the ruling, it's terrible, but let's just say it is. They need to make sure it's uniform and everyone rules fairly across the board and they're all in line with each other. And I mean, again, this cannot happen at champs. Like, I know most people are already saying like, okay, the season is washed, whatever, just play out the rest of it. But even then, like, champs is something that people are still looking forward to, and there is potential to have a really good tournament. So
what do you make of Mr. Austin Lidicote's tweet where he said, I'm going to likely take time off next season if the CDL is online? And honestly, Emily, if we're putting a percentage to it, what do you think? 75% chance that CDL at least starts online next year? Maybe? If I were to guess, January 2021. I'm not. I don't want to get into the pandemic topic. I'm just making but for this conversation,
yeah,
I would say 75% is a fair guess. So assuming it does,
I mean, they would have to. So, like, in order to start on land, they would basically have to make it so that they would, like, if this is still going on, which it will probably have some form of it still going on, they basically have to like get everyone in the same location, quarantine them for 14 days, and then have them play each other to have a LAN, right? I do think that as more options become available and as people start experimenting with different ways to do that, that's not out of the realm of possibility. But there is a chance that it starts online. I do not blame him whatsoever. He has had a particularly rough season, and especially after, I mean, some of the stuff that happened this weekend with spawns. I would have thrown my controller across the room and just be like, I quit. But he is apparently less volatile than I am. So, I mean, I think, I don't blame him. B, I think a lot of things have to change to make sure that it's more, again, like, rulings have to be clear across the board. We need to make sure that servers are all like polished, up to date. Everyone has like the best access to them if this is going to continue online. And hopefully the game itself will be better. which is another thing that like I do think all the stuff that's happened online is like really awful, and most of it is not the game's fault. But I also think people would be slightly more forgiving if the game was not Modern Warfare as well. So that's also something to consider.
Let's look back quickly at the London Royal Ravens home series won by Dallas Empire. Lots of surprising results here, including Dallas completely steamrolling Florida and surprise finalists Paris in the final with 3-0 totals. Absolutely reminding everyone that you should be paying attention to the Router Kings and not necessarily the Mutineers. I know we got spawns to talk about.
Yeah, you can also call the Mutineers Router Kings, I guess, if you wanted to.
Well, I'll save that for a little bit later.
Yeah.
The COD competitive subreddit put out a really interesting LAN to online map win comparison. We'll talk about that in a minute. But overall impressions from London and Dallas reclaiming their throne, at least for this home series.
I mean, I don't think it should be. I think we both predicted Dallas to do pretty well, even though I believe I picked the subliners to take it again, which was completely wrong. And I don't think Dallas winning this is a shock, right? Like, it's not a huge upset. It's not even necessarily, and like I say this in no offense to Paris, because I think Paris looked so much better this weekend. I know we're going to talk about them next. But whenever you have like a massive upset like you do with Paris, I think, in making it through the bracket, and then that 5-game series that they had against London, which isn't as massive of an upset as people would think, but it was still an upset. Whenever that happens, you do tend to have more one-sided final series like we saw in this. I mean, Dallas, they beat Paris on Ramaza the first time they met, like 250 to 73, right?
It was bad.
So it was, Paris improved and they had looked a lot better across the board at this tournament. But for me, in terms of who was going to win, I was looking at Dallas, I was looking at New York, and I was looking at Florida. And I was like, okay, it's, one of these three teams. And I think Dallas is so weird because I feel like they immediately like go out of people's heads when they don't play, which is very funny. Like of all of the top teams, I feel like people always have like Atlanta and Huntsman in their minds. And then for whatever reason, when Dallas don't play, like people just forget about them. And then they come back and they're like, we're still here, guys. And we're still really good. So, I mean, they looked really good this weekend, and I was happy to see them play and see them do well.
So Dallas had a 51.1% win rate on LAN, a 66.7% win rate online, best in the league, which is a marked improvement, obviously, an increase of 15%. Paris, meanwhile, went from 56.8% on LAN, which was third in the league at the point, to 35.9% online, second last win rate online. And yet, here they are making the finals for the first time in a home series. I still, and good for them, because finally, like, if there is one team, Emily, that we have talked about the least, right? We never, ever talk about the Paris Legion. And to be fair, they don't give us much reason to talk about them. And now finally they've said, no. Le temps est maintenant. The time is now. Speak about us.
I also speak French.
That's right. We are well equipped to speak about the Paris Legion right now. So with that in mind, what did you make of Paris and their performance in this home series? And do you think that this is a sign of things to come for them?
So I'll say, like, one note I do want to make about the win rate thing is that one thing that's really frustrating, and not to say that these numbers should be completely thrown out, because I don't think they should, but one thing that's really frustrating is like you have that one launch weekend where it was league
Right.
play.
Right.
And that is actually one of the reasons why Dallas is not in first right now. It's also one of the reasons why the subliners percentage, I think, is the highest from LAN to online. And then similarly with Paris, they did really well launch weekend, and they placed in London in the first actual physical home series. And then they've had a really rough time online, but those 20 points from that first week are counting significantly in the dip that they took, right, in win percentage. That's one thing I wanted to bring up. The thing about Paris that we've repeated, whenever we've talked about Paris, we've kind of just been like, oh yeah, they're inconsistent, right? Like that's what we've said about them the entire time. Like, it's not like we haven't seen some really good performances from Zed. It's not like we haven't seen really good performances from Luka or Kismet. Like, we've seen them individually like pop off, right? And it's always been okay, but this team is so wildly inconsistent that they can't string together enough wins, or they can't turn these individual performances, regardless of how good they are, into actual map wins. One thing I think that was really interesting about Paris is their S&D, specifically in the London series. And like, obviously this did not hold true for Dallas, but I still consider Dallas to be one of the best S&D teams. So they had kind of a crushing loss in the finals to them. But I think their adjustments against London were really smart, because London typically tends to be a team that likes to be able to sit back, take their time, set up Weskin. He basically sits as a sniper. And you know, if they can take their time in setups, they're a lot better off, and they don't respond well to people's adjustments in game plans, and they don't respond well to like really, really unmitigated aggression. And I don't think unmitigated aggression is necessarily what we saw from Paris, but I did like a lot of their changes. That's obviously a crushing loss for London, right? Like, it comes down to like the very last possible point and they lose. Which is kind of, I feel like, a summation of the entire London season this year. Like, if a microcosm for that is that map. But I did like what Paris did. I think the problem with Paris is not that they don't have talent, but like, what are we going to see from them the next time, right? And I believe that they are they're done, so we won't see them again until champs. But yeah, I think that's always been the big thing about Paris. Is so
they're currently in 8th, and they could go as far back as 10th based on this weekend's results.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's still kind of a rough spot to be in. I think they did the best they could to put themselves in like a good position, right? Like, we were talking about teams that could do that at this event, and we talked about Optic, and we talked about possibly Seattle, and we talked about London, right? But we didn't really talk about Paris, and they put themselves in about the best position they could without winning the entire event, right? So that's a good sign for them. The problem is, like, whenever I see Paris do well, I don't know whether they're going to be able to do well the next week, right? Because there's been no guarantee for this team in terms of stringing together wins, be it like just maps within a series or like general series wins.
So going back to your point about Paris's SND in this tournament, they only lost one SND, and that was in the final against Dallas. They actually won the SND against Dallas on Friday, with the tournament beginning against the Dallas Empire. They went 6-5 both times against London in the semifinal, which was very, very dramatic. I love it, which was great. It was a lot of fun to watch as a neutral observer. Not so fun for our respective superiors, who are both London Royal Ravens fans. Shout out to them. But a lot of fun. So I don't know. Listen, if there was any time to have your best result of the season, it would be in your last showing going into playoffs. So maybe momentum will be a factor there. But I just feel like, given everything we've seen this season, this might be the highest that we see Paris all season long. And yeah, sure, a lot of that is where were the results the rest of the time. Not to say they can't replicate it, but they're still in a tough position, especially if Optic Gaming and Toronto have good weekends
Mhm.
this weekend. That's going to be very rough for them, bringing them down to that last bottom four position, which would put you in the losers round one, which is very difficult to get out of.
Yeah, that's going to be. I mean, I think the big thing for Paris and like the hope that they have, I guess, is that when you're looking at the other teams, I'm gonna kind of discount. Yeah, we don't know where Toronto is going to end up. But like the cool thing is that like they beat London this week, right? The Rocker have also been really inconsistent since coming online. Optic, I don't think looked half bad this weekend, actually. I mean, we can move to talk about spawns maybe in that Florida series because that would have tilted me off the face of the earth.
So let's talk about it.
I mean, like, there's nothing like I don't want to take away from Florida either, right? Because I feel like whenever this happens, people are like, "Oh, you're saying that Florida wouldn't do as well, or like it's taking away from their talent." I think Florida has proven that they have really strong talent on this team. I also think that yes, they've done a lot better online, but the only player who's really like who I would really question online would be Awakening, or like as in LAN versus online would be Awakening, just because we haven't seen him on LAN yet with this team. But those calling into question like Pharaoh, for example, I think Pharaoh already proved in previous COD seasons that he can perform on LAN. But I thought Draza and Hollow looked pretty good. Like I don't know what you thought, but they brought them in. Optic looked a lot more I don't know, energetic, I guess. Like they looked a little bit revitalized, which we've seen. Like we joked about it last week, right? Like what if Optic made finals, with their new players? That'd be a really sick narrative. And they were really close to making it to bracket stage at least, because they narrowly lost to Florida the first time. Like they gave them a really close match in round one, and then they I'm not going to blame the loss on Tilt, but honestly, like after that Dom, I would be throwing things seriously. And that's not Florida's fault either. It's a game thing that's happened multiple times across the season, and there's unfortunately nothing people can do about it. That's why my lovely sign here says spawns with an exclamation point.
And just to put everything into context, just in case you forgot the score of that Dom, 157, 154. Okay, put that into perspective of that particular spawn in that particular moment with that score.
It's Optics map for sure. Like
right,
no question.
After having one hard point, okay, a tough contested hard point in game one, 250 to 239. Then Florida bounces back on Search and Destroy and Gunrunner. Okay, then you have a Hackney R domination, and Optic is looking good. They're holding their own. They're about to win. That is deflating. And you know what? You're right. A different spawn even, and that could be Optic series. We could be having a whole different conversation right now, if not for that one moment, right? Now, with that said, I will say that I do believe that Optic have a good... We will get to our predictions later. We'll talk about the Toronto home series. I do think Optic are in good position to be able to gain a lot of ground. And in fact, if you look at the COD competitive Reddit, put a really cool graphic together that basically shows the elastic band of where every team can end up. And Optic Gaming have the widest margin. They could be as high as 6th if they have a good placement, and as low as 11th. So I do believe that even though they're in 9th right now in the standings, I think they look at that and say, no. We're going to let that go, put it behind us, but there is some potential here. We have to show it in Toronto, and I think that they're going to have a really great tournament. I think that
Yeah,
the potential is there for sure.
I hope they can. Yeah, this would be a rough one to put behind, but especially with what we said previously with what Slasher said, and but I mean I'd be really frustrated if I was an Optic fan or player, and I do hope that they can go to Toronto, and perform well, because that's a really frustrating way to lose. And I think obviously it's only one it's only one event, but I thought Draws on Hollow were pretty good. And again, I think the team looked like they were a little bit revitalized from it. Obviously, like sometimes making a change just does that. We've talked about that before. So yeah, I mean, it'd be really hard for me to put it behind, but I hold grudges, so we'll see. I hope well, again, we're going to preview the series coming up, but I think that there's a non-zero chance for them to get out of Group A for sure.
Before we get to the Toronto home series, speaking of frustration, if there is one team that looks back at the London Royal Ravens home series and is tilted beyond belief, it has to be the New York Subliners. I
was going to say Seattle, but...
Well, Seattle, we already talked about that. Okay, sorry. Based on results and their play, based on previous success, has to be the Subliners. They fizzle out against the Dallas Empire. They get 3-0'd. Then, in a surprising turn of events, they get knocked out of the tournament in spectacular fashion, another 3-0 against the Paris Legion. So, Emily, based on their recent results, based on the fact that they are the 5th team this season to have won a home series very recently, and then seeing these results, any concern on your part?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the one thing we wanted to see from the Subliners, and I know I keep harping on this, but and the reason why the coaches would kind of rate them a little bit more highly than where they were actually placed is because they were doing super well in scrims. And everyone's like, we're super afraid of them, et cetera, et cetera. They never showed it when at events. They finally, they're just on the cusp of breaking through. They still don't make it all the way to the final. They finally win their own home series. And then they have an incredibly disappointing showing this past weekend. It is concerning because you wanted to see them sustain that momentum, right? We expected them to, at the very least, make semis. I did not expect New York to not make semis. I expected them to win, actually. But but if outside of the bracketology of everything, at the very least, I definitely expected them to be in semis. So that's really disappointing for them. Although I will say the one good thing is that those 10 points were enough, actually, on top of their win to guarantee them a spot in the 5 through 8 bracket. So at the very least, they don't have to go through the losers round 1 at champs, which is hopefully a load off their mind a bit, since they're not playing this weekend either. So they're not really in charge of their own destiny anymore in terms of placement. But yeah, it's not great to see. I really wanted to see them take the momentum from winning their series and carry it into this event. And I don't feel like that happened at all.
So I'm going to quickly catch everyone up on how the playoffs work as we lead into the Toronto series and what is at stake in terms of placement. So first, if you place first and second in the CDL Pro standings, you're automatically seeded into round 3 winners bracket. Ideal, you skip the first 2 rounds. Third and fourth get into round 2 winners bracket. 5th through 8th go to round 1 winners bracket, and if you're in 9th or 12th, which is last, you're seeded in round 1 of the elimination bracket. So you're already starting at a huge disadvantage. Don't forget, the 2020 champion wins $2 million. So right now,
just sliding that in there, by the way, there's a lot of money here.
By the way, $2 million. Make sure your internet is in working functional order.
Call up your internet company, be like, yo, I need this. to not cut out today.
Can you imagine the guy at Verizon is like, I got this really weird call today. Like someone was like, I better not wreck their internet, or like there better not be an interruption between this time or else. Like I think it was a threat.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
the top four teams are essentially set in the top four positions. Atlanta, Dallas, Florida, Chicago are set. The ordering of them is not set, but
mhm.
they are the teams that will be in the top four positions.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
any of them can end up first, and any of them can end up fourth, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
You mentioned the subliners. They can end at best fifth where they are, or at worst sixth. London are sixth. They will stay in the fifth to eighth position, as will Minnesota, despite their slip online. And by the way, they have among the lowest overall difference from LAN to online, 56% win rate on LAN, 39% online. So they are ninth in the league in online play. So they can, but still, despite all that, their worst result at the end of the season could be eighth. The teams that have the most to lose really are Paris, Optic Gaming, and Toronto. So they can end up either eighth in that 5 to 8 category, with Optic having the best spot to go to sixth, or they can end up in the 9th to 12th, which would be detrimental. They would start in the round one losers bracket. So there's a lot of rubber banding that could happen here. And I don't mean in play, I mean in the standings.
Hopefully not in play, but we never know.
The only team that is guaranteed to stay where they are, Emily Rand, is the LA Gorillas, who will end up dead last in the standings.
Poor Gorillas.
Yes. So let's now talk about the Toronto home series. This leads us to the last home series of regular season play, and it is being hosted by a city that you and I both know very, very well. We have both lived there.
We both lived there.
Yep, and it is a wonderful city. Some Emily, some people might call it the greatest city on earth. Some.
I wouldn't go that far, but I did love living there. It was very fun.
What is your favorite memory of the city of Toronto? How long did you live there?
I only lived there for about like half a year, I think.
Okay.
I just really liked wandering around down by the waterfront, or like taking the ferry out to Toronto Island and like drawing there. That was really fun. I don't know, it was very chill. I liked it.
Toronto Island is a very you need to ask people in Toronto about Toronto Island. It's one of those like hidden gems of the city. I know we can talk about the city for hours and hours. Maybe that'll be a separate podcast, but let's talk about the home series. Yeah, the Toronto podcast. Exactly. I think it's a great idea. I mean, so we got Minnesota, Atlanta, Dallas, Florida, Seattle, Chicago, OGLA, and Toronto. Let's go through the first matchups that we will see in the home series. So Group A will be Chicago, Seattle, Toronto, Optic. Group B will be Atlanta, Minnesota, Florida, and Dallas. Match number 1, Minnesota taking on the Atlanta FaZe. This is the first matchup between these two teams since the league went online. The series is tied 1-1 with the Rocker winning the last match at the LA home series. Seems like a lifetime ago. Can the Rocker turn it around here? I feel like the weight is a little bit off their shoulders because they have nowhere to gain and nowhere to lose, really. But which team here would you say, like, do you think this is an opportunity for Minnesota to say, okay, let's just test ourselves against a team like Atlanta here?
I mean, it's like saddens me that Minnesota have performed as poorly as they have online for a few reasons. And one of them is because when we were talking about this matchup at the, after they almost beat FaZe in Atlanta, right? And then they go to beat them in LA. This was a matchup where we were like, okay, like this Rocker team can hold their own against the guns of FaZe, and that's actually super impressive. And now this matchup is completely different. I do actually think that FaZe have more pressure on them in this first round than Rocker do, for reasons that you already mentioned, because, A, people aren't expecting the Rocker to win, but B, the Rocker in moving around within their own seating don't have as much to lose as the FaZe do, right? Like the FaZe really want to lock up that number 1 seed. So, and especially after their more recent loss, I think they probably feel like they have a lot more to prove in this matchup. I still think the FaZe will win. Because I haven't seen anything from the Rocker recently that would convince me otherwise. But I would love for something to happen, like a switch to be flipped, and it to be like what we saw from Rocker FaZe matchups in Los Angeles and in Atlanta.
So the Atlanta FaZe have the lowest overall difference between LAN and online. They had a 78.8% win rate on LAN, and so far online, their win rate is 57.6%, which is a difference of minus 21%, which is unfortunate.
I mean, not great, but I also think so again, like I'm not taking away from the fact that I think Atlanta would probably perform better if it was on LAN. But I think that part of that is also that a lot of teams have kind of caught up to Atlanta's understanding of the game, and Atlanta were one of the first teams to come out and really embrace the game and embrace how to play. And, they had the super aggressive SMGs. And I think that the meta changes that we've seen aside, I think that other teams have caught up to the FaZe's understanding of the game. And that's a lot more of what we've seen rather than the FaZe just looking really lost. Online, I also think that their dominance that they had over the first few weeks definitely wasn't sustainable for those reasons. They would have had to keep improving on an insane trajectory in order to hold off the rest of the teams and keep having that win rate.
Moving on to the Dallas Empire taking on the Florida Mutineers. This is a rematch of the London semifinal match, of course. Dallas have swept the Mutineers 3-0. The Florida Mutineers have had success against the Empire. I want to call attention to one thing. So after every home series on our website, espn.com/esports, we do a coaches poll. It's an anonymous poll that coaches basically rank the teams in the CDL. Going into this weekend, the Florida Mutineers were number 1 on this coaches poll. Dallas was number 2. Coming out of this weekend, Dallas was number 1, perhaps understandably so. They just won another home series, and they defeated Florida in the process. But according to the coaches around the league, Florida drops to number 4, which I found to be interesting. That is a sharp drop after this weekend's results. It was a convincing victory, don't get me wrong. But they still look like a menacing team online, even if they didn't make the final this home series. So how do you think they're looking at this matchup and the fact that they get to run it back so soon against Dallas?
I mean, I still give Dallas this matchup. Maybe it won't be a 3-0 sweep, but if I had to hazard a guess as to the somewhat precipitous drop in the coaches poll, and again, this is kind of it's based on hearsay, right? I'm kind of making a lot of assumptions, but I think the thing with Florida was that how we talked about the subliners and how they were known as such this insane scrim team. Florida was the team that showed up at events, right? They showed up at online events. Suddenly, they were insane whenever the event pressure was on. And Florida, I think probably a little bit more, I don't think they're bad in scrims, but I don't think they have the same firepower that you see from them on at an actual tournament. So when they falter at a tournament like this, I think that's when they drop significantly in people's estimation. Again, I'm making a lot of assumptions, but I think that's most likely what's behind the drop. I think Florida can still be a dangerous team, but we definitely did not see them at their best this weekend. Like I said, that first match against Optics, really close. Unfortunately, the match against their second qualification match. So, first of all, one thing we haven't mentioned is that London beat them, and they were the first qualifier out of that bracket, not Florida, as we may have expected. But then we also, unfortunately, have that match where looming over Florida's head are those kind of wonky spawns in that second series they had against Optics. So,
Yeah, I'm with you. I think
like
Dallas takes this one.
I think Dallas is just the better team here, honestly. Like from what we've seen from both of these teams recently.
Dallas really made me believe that they would. I thought Florida would have the edge just based on their online play, but this past weekend really reminded us that Dallas is the most well-equipped team to, in high pressure situations, to be the team to pick in a playoff format. Like they just show this resiliency that even when they have bad results, they're able to bounce back very quickly. If Florida have a good showing here, and if they go so far as to win the home series, that could definitely sway people's opinions, including a victory over Dallas. But Dallas have really their body of work speaks for itself, and also obviously the veterans on that team. Let's go Seattle taking on Chicago. I'm pretty sure we know who's going to win this game if you ask many people. But let me ask just Chicago overall. Like, what results for you would give you more confidence in this Huntsman team?
I mean, I think Chicago need to make it out of Group A as the first seed. Honestly,
okay.
I think they should. Like, if we're looking at a tournament where all top 4 seeded teams right now are playing, and 3 of them are on one side of the bracket, and 1 of them is on the other side of the bracket. So, like, this is the time when we talk about what makes a championship team. It means you beat the opponents that you're expected to beat, and no offense to all of the other 3 teams in this bracket, but if we're expecting Chicago to be a championship team, these are 3 teams that they should beat, including Seattle, obviously. I feel really badly talking about Seattle at this point, because if I'm on Seattle, I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm done. Like, you know, like this season's over. We're chalking it. We're going next. We've already lost. And like that, I'm not saying that's what Seattle is thinking, but like, it's been a rough year for Seattle overall, right? I definitely think Chicago takes this, but if you're asking me, like, what does this say about Chicago? I think they absolutely need to make it out, like, 2 series into semifinals.
Which is going to be tough because you have Toronto and Optic with so much to play for. So that they might be more. You could say that they would have a lot more motivation to pick up points than Chicago, because Chicago knows, win or lose, they're in the top 4 anyway. So that might make for some interesting results.
Yeah, weirdly, this like is the first round series I'm looking forward to the most, because I'm like, okay, like you guys, I still don't have a really great read on you. And it could be like, I'm expecting this to probably be a 3-2. I'm gonna give the edge to Toronto, but like I really liked a lot of things I saw from Optic this past weekend. It's really going to be about whether they can put the London home series behind them and kind of come out and be like, okay, you know, that happened and it sucked, but we're in control of our own destiny and we can place as high as 6th. So, I mean, they of all teams probably have they should be having like the most hunger coming into this, right? Because
absolutely
they can move up significantly from where they're at right now.
They also have
they're like technically in charge of it because they're playing.
Exactly. And they both, oddly enough, OGLA and Toronto have extremely similar online win percentages. 47.7% for OGLA and 47.5% for Toronto. So they're like very, very close in the win percentage standings in online play in CDL this season. And yeah, they have their fate in their own hands. You win and you move up. And it's as simple as that, with OGLA having the opportunity to go further along. Let me ask this question. When you look at the groups, is Group B the most dense or like the biggest group of death we've had all season? It feels like it has to be. Right? Like Atlanta, Florida, Dallas, and Minnesota?
It would be if we were, excuse me, it would be, I'm trying to think of what other group of deaths we've had. It might be actually, because like Minnesota is so frustrating because I know that they have the talent.
They do. You're right.
It's just one of those things where you're just like, why are you why have you not performed? Like, you know me, I hate when teams have obvious talent and I know that they can do well and I've seen them do well and then they falter. I want everyone to always be playing at their best, like always. I'm looking through past groups of death. This might be this probably is, the closest one we've had, with 3 of the top 4 teams in the same bracket and the expectation that they're all going to do well. Because I'm looking at I've gone back through the past like 3-4 events now. We haven't had anything as stacked as that bracket. So yeah.
All right, let's end the show on this. Predictions. Pick a winner. Toronto home series. Who you got?
So hard. I don't think, unless Atlanta shows something, I don't think it will be Atlanta. I think they'll still place. Like, I think Atlanta makes semifinals at least, maybe finals. I hate, like, I feel like I keep running it back. Like, I feel like all of my predictions are like, I just saw Dallas do really well, so like I'm gonna bet on Dallas. But that's kind of what I'm feeling right now. Like I'm feeling either a Dallas or Chicago win, and I'm gonna go with Dallas.
I need a Florida win. For the sake of,
like, put Toronto aside. You actually do love Florida.
I love the story of Florida. I do. And I love the players that they've brought in, and they perform really well. And I think that this team, I will say this, if they have another poor showing here, and it's funny to say poor showing because they made the semifinals, but if they have a concerning showing here and they don't make the final, at least, then we have question marks. Because listen, like I've said, they were my number 1 team a couple weeks ago. Even going into the last home series, they were my number 1 team. And they had every right to be in that position. And with one series, that has cast all doubt, as you can see from the coaches poll. And that is concerning. So another bad result for Florida here this weekend will really, really impact people's perception of them, and also going into the playoffs and champs. But I look at that Group A and I'm like, man, this is prime for a run for Toronto and Optic. I really do. I think it's down to them. I think whoever makes it out of that between Toronto and Optic have a really good chance in that whole, any CDL team can win any series at any given time, because the competition has never been better. The amount of teams and the amount of quality players in the league, Toronto and Optic, the way that they've been playing lately and the impressive victories that they have shown in certain home series, even if they haven't gotten the results that they've wanted in home series victories, they could absolutely show up and end the season on a high note and get better placement as a result. And they have the motivation to do it because they need to do it. Of any teams in this entire home series, they are the ones that need the points the most.
Yeah, they can both get themselves out of that first round.
Exactly. And that would be extremely important, not to mention the prize money, right? You get yourself out of the first round, you're guaranteeing yourself a better chance at higher prize money and already starting with a base. So that's why it's so important. So for that reason, I'm saying, all right, let's see a run from either team. And that's my prediction. So with that, thank you very much for watching Search and Destroy. We will be back next week to break down everything that happened in the Toronto home series. And then at that point, we'll let you know exactly what's going to happen as we move into playoffs and what the shows will look like.
MVPs.
That's right. That's right. We will have a lot to talk about. So in the meantime and in between time, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.